Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world.
You are listening to the Spiritual Activist Radio Show, and I am Rahasya Uncensored, where we look at the world not as it is, but as we know it can be, if and only if we have the courage to question the answers we've been given. This is our world, and it's time for us to take it back. All right, welcome to the BBS Radio Show again, where I, Rahasya Uncensored, have my show, which is bbsradio.com/spiritual activist. And once again, the name spiritual activist, this has to do with looking at things that are happening right now and trying to find the underlying spiritual or consciousness reasons behind this. Because I'm going to read an article I wrote for the recent issue of Lotus Guide, which is a magazine that we publish here in Northern California. And it's all about alternative health, alternative living, which doesn't seem to be all that popular today with a lot of the ongoing media. I've been taken off of YouTube twice. I've been sanctioned on there. And the only reason for that is giving false medical advice, which basically I was just saying maybe we should question the ongoing rhetoric. But I think the picture behind me pretty much says what's happening right now. We're all being hypnotized. And this has been going on for centuries, by the way. The powers that be knows what they're doing. So let me just get right into the article here, because I think it's important to understand that we put a lot of attention on who is doing this. You know, we have different opinions, but we basically know who's behind this, or at least the front people, the Hillarys, the Bidens, the whatever. We know why they're doing this, and why they're doing it, they've already told us. They want depopulation by 2030. Just look it up. United Nations Agenda 21. They're pretty up front about it, which actually sort of kills me. Not literally, hopefully, but we have to stop and think. I mean, a 7-year-old, if you would lay this out to a 7-year-old, I think they would say, well, I don't know about this. The same people that have said that, I get into this in the article, but same people that told us that cigarette smoking is healthy for us and it's okay, more doctors recommend, blah, blah, blah. These are the same people giving us the vaccination shots too. So at least we should question this. And that's all I said on my YouTube, and they took it down. But thank goodness for platforms like BBS Radio. I'm also on BitChute, bitchute.com/Rahasya Uncensored. I'm going to be on Rumble. I've also started putting things up on Substack, which is a place where writers can go to have some freedom while we still have it. But let me get into the article I wrote, and we'll just sort of go from there, because I think it's important to understand how they're doing this. I mean, how are they doing this? This is the question. Name of my article is Mass Psychosis or Collective Insanity. I like to say hypnosis because that's sort of behind a lot of this. Preemptive programming, pretty much laying the groundwork for what they're coming. Like Event 201 laid it out perfectly, everything that's happening right now with the coronavirus. Read SPARS. I mean, 2025 to 2028, they're laying it all out perfectly, what they have in plan for us. So get informed. I mean, that's the main thing, is getting your good information out there. But what we're going to concentrate today is, how are they doing this? How are they doing this? I mean, I am amazed at some of my closest friends, spiritual and otherwise, how easily they took to their knees and bowed down and submitted to what's going on. And some of them have even taken the vaccination. And I have not a personal friend, but I have a personal friend, her boyfriend took it and died. Um, look up coronavirus and look up Eric Clapton, what he's gone through, especially with the booster shot. And what he gets to talk about is sort of what I'm talking about too, above and beyond the vaccinations, all the rhetoric. What is happening to our population? His family gave so much pressure, so much peer pressure and everything else. That's why he took the shot in the first place, and he regrets it now. But he's seen his family and friends really getting sort of lost in this. So let's just read through my article here, and I think you'll understand where it's going. Mass Psychosis, aka Collective Insanity, by me, Rahasya. Like I say, this is in the September, October, November, December issue of Lotus Guide, which is lotusguide.com. Before we take a look at what's going on in today's world, today, let me just start over. It's a good thing that I'm not a professional at this. I'm just like you guys. I'm just trying to make sense of what's going on, live out my life, help as many people as possible. So if this doesn't come across totally professional, sorry about that. It's not. I'm a one-man band. I do my technical stuff, the video, sweep up at night, the whole shot. Hopefully, I think someday I might start putting more emphasis on my podcasts, by the way, and see if we can come out of this amateurish looking thing here. Okay, start over here. Before we take a look at what's going on today, let's take a brief look at the past when true mass psychosis has taken over a population. There are hundreds of examples where this has started to take hold, but outspoken, rational, critical thinkers like us were quick to see the danger and stopped it in its tracks by speaking out. Let's take a look at a couple of obvious instances of mass psychosis. I recently watched an interview with Eckhart Tolle on the Dave Rubin Report, and I really suggest you watch Dave Rubin too. It's he does a good job. Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, dare I say Alex Jones, but I tell you, I've been watching Alex Jones for years and saying, nah, this can't be true. And year by year, things he's been saying comes true. So I'm listening to what he's saying now, and he does read the transcripts. There's been a couple things he's been off on, but for the most part, he's worth listening to. On the Dave Rubin Report, and he said that it's undeniable that we are in a state of collective insanity on this planet, which is far more dangerous than COVID-19 virus. Now, this is Eckhart Tolle speaking, and if you don't know who Eckhart Tolle is, Power of Now, he's a #1 writer. Look him up. He's pretty good. He reminds me a little bit of Osho. I think he's been influenced by Osho a lot. He pointed out what happened in Cambodia when the Marxist communist leader Pol Pot was the driving force behind genocide of 1/3 of the country's population. Why? Because they were considered enemies of the state. Anyone who could read or write or wore glasses was systematically starved to death or executed. That was collective insanity on a grand scale. Now, this has happened many, many, many times on this planet. I can't go into them all, but another instance of collective insanity broke out in America and Europe when women were accused of being witches for doing something as innocent as cooking with herbs in the late 1690s. This actually went on for about a century, off and on, but it hit its climax in the 1690s. In some small villages in Europe, there were hardly any women left when the madness subsided. Of course, we could talk about the more obvious times in history where people like Stalin and Hitler killed untold millions, many of which were their own people. Now, the women that were left were few and far between in some places in Europe and in the United States. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine that happening now for some people. But the more I look at the news and what's going on, it's getting easier to imagine that there would be no critical thinkers left. You know, us people that wear glasses and can read and write. So what happens is clear. Millions of innocent people die at the hands of insane societies that they live in. But just as important is the answer to how this happens. Well, lo and behold, there's actually an actual strategy plan for psychopaths that they have used for centuries on unsuspecting sleeping masses of people. However, now in the 21st century of advanced technology, media, and communications, the game has risen to a new level, with a large percentage of the masses still completely unaware. And I can verify this so much with people around me. I've told friends, I've given them all the information on the vaccinations, and they still took them. And now they're a little bit sorry they did. Some of them are having severe problems. I just heard, too, that the top board members of the Food and Drug Administration voted 19-2 to start taking these vaccinations more serious as a danger to society. So that's a start. You may be asking how this could go unnoticed when we live in the information age. Part of the answer is algorithms, which is a subject for a future date, but there's much more to the story that I want to touch on. Now, algorithms is what's burying people like myself and others that are speaking out. It's getting more and more difficult to find me on YouTube. My views have gone down. I don't even support it anymore by promoting YouTube. But and I've lost a lot of followers for some mysterious reason. How that happens, I don't know. Okay, here we are today with a huge section of the population that seems to be incapable of understanding the most basic facts. Why? There are two things in play here by design. One is the fact that when you are put into fear, your frontal lobes, where critical thinking happens, shut down, and you go into a more reptilian part. Now, if the reptilian area, where you can only react to the perceived threat, real or unreal. The reason I'm getting stumbled here, I keep thinking of things I want to say in here, but let me get through some of this. The other thing to consider is the fact that most people turn away from any truth that makes them uncomfortable. They can't handle the truth, as Jack Nicholson would say. Gustave Le Bon once said, "Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their enemy." And that seems to be the truth, I tell you. I get some of the craziest mail that from idiots and morons. I mean, it's easy to undermine what they're saying because they don't look up the facts, which makes it sort of ironic, you know, because they keep quoting things, follow the science. Well, if you follow the scientists are telling us, beware. But back to how this is going on. Carl Jung weighs in on this subject by pointing out that we are indeed our own worst enemy. Not the forces of nature or pandemics, but the pandemic of our own mind. Read Civilization in Transition by Carl Jung to dive deep into this. In his book, he states, "This is a sad yet eternal truism, and our wolf-like tendencies come most prominently into play at those times of history when mental illness becomes the norm rather than the exception in a society." He called this a psychic epidemic. And I tell you, it doesn't take much to watch TikTok. Some of the young millennials, I mean, 20-year-olds with shaved heads, with pink hair, telling me what life is about and what I should be doing and how I should be living my life. It just isn't the people I think we should be listening to at this point. I mean, half of them are still sleeping on their parents' couch. Okay, back to the article. So, simply put, a mass psychosis happens when a large portion of a society lives with its comfortable delusions and loses touch with reality. Young points out that when mass psychosis takes hold, those infected become morally and spiritually inferior and become unreasonable. And I think we can see this all over the place, not only the fake news, but in our society. Look what's happening. I mean, Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with Black Lives Mattering. It's a Black Lives Matter Inc. It's a multi-million-dollar corporation. They've never given $1 to black people. Matter of fact, the director, I think she bought her fourth $1 million home. It has nothing to do with Black Lives Mattering. Okay, they become unreasonable, emotionally erratic, irresponsible, and unreliable. Sounds a little bit like our Congress, doesn't it? He points out something that we all have thought about, which is that as a mob gone mad, people can commit crimes that they would never commit as individuals, hence the term lynch mob and never the term lynch person. I think that's important to realize. There's people out there right now doing things in these mobs, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and a number of other organizations that are being funded by people like George Soros. I mean, it's pointing directly to him. But you take any of those people out of the crowd singularly, they wouldn't do anything. As a matter of fact, it's coming down in South Africa. These mobs that are out just devastating South Africa. The people are taken to the streets now with guns, and as soon as they point a gun at them, they scatter, and they're a bunch of cowards. Okay, back to the article. He points out something that we all have thought about, which is that as a mob gone mad, people commit crimes. The lynch mob, lynch person, never hear about it. Young also points out that the person suffering from mass hypnosis, psychosis, lacks the ability to see that he is part of a delusion and has lost contact with reality. He believes his actions make perfect sense, validating everything from mass genocide to burning women at the stake or exiting Afghanistan and leaving almost $90 billion worth of advanced military weapons for our enemy. I mean, that seems a little crazy. The Taliban is our enemy right now, and we've just made them a well-armed enemy and gave them a whole country to establish their base of taking out their evil on whoever they want to aim it at. And now they can use against us doing everything possible to disarm American citizens. The Taliban now has more Black Hawk helicopters than the Australian military and billions of dollars worth of guns and advanced high-tech equipment. They even have, I think it was 14,000 night vision scopes. Now, what does that mean? It means now they can go out at night and shoot people. And the people that they're shooting don't even know where it's coming from. And we gave them that technology. I mean, my God. I think, matter of fact, Dave Rubin of the Dave Rubin Report, every year he takes 1 month and disappears. No cell phones, no computers, no internet, no nothing. And he just got back, and he got together with Glenn Beck, and Glenn Beck caught him up on what's going on. And what stood out in Glenn Beck's mind was the fact that what was in Dave Rubin's mind wasn't so much what was going on, but how's the media framing this? That's what we have to be concerned with. Because what's going on is one thing, but what people are hearing about is a total different thing. Many things in our society can set collective insanity off, such as pharmaceutical or illegal drugs, most of which are being unloaded on our society and walked across our open borders with little or no interference. This has been happening for a long time. We guard the poppy fields, and look back what happened in the 70s with the CIA smuggling in tons of cocaine into, I think, Alabama or Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was, and Bill Clinton had a lot to do with that. I don't know. People, sometimes I get so frustrated, but I have to calm down and just ground myself and bring my focus back, because there's so much to be taking a look at now. Back to the article. But what we should be concerned with are called psychogenic triggers. And the most noticeable one that we should be concerned with is the abundance of negative emotions pumped into our minds that cause panic and stress. Once we are in a state of panic, we instinctively search for relief from the emotion that is unsustainable. People are in a state of mind right now where they're stressed out, frustrated, and it cannot go on. Cannot go on. And I'm going to get to there's only a couple of options at that point. If we allow ourselves to be in this state, we have a couple of choices. One is to acknowledge the situation we are in and face the source generating the fear, which requires risk, the very thing we are trying to avoid. And the other is to have a psychotic break, which takes us even deeper into the abyss where disorder and chaos are restructured by blending fact and fiction and creating a reality that eases our feeling of panic and anxiety. The new normal. This is where the corporate media is doing an outstanding job. And believe me, that's not a compliment. It takes a very courageous spiritual warrior type, once you get to that level of stress and dysfunction, to look at the very thing that's causing all that in your life and realize that the reality that you have built and manifested by filtering out anything that you don't believe in or don't believe is actually not true, and start dismantling that. I went through this when I wrote a book called To Believe or Not to Believe, the consequences of the social and political movements that are on us. The book is called To Believe or Not to Believe by Rahasya. It's available on Amazon. But I realized that the reality that we build is not the reality that is. And to really face that and go deeply into it takes a courageous person. But I tell you, once you do it, especially if you've been deep into it, once you do that and come out the other side, you are a force to be reckoned with. You're hardly afraid of anything. Silvano Ariati, an authority on schizophrenia, explains the psychogenic steps that lead to madness. The first is when the person starts seeing things in a different way and becomes frightened and confused and lacks the understanding of why things are so strange, which puts them in a state of panic. The next step is called Psychotic Insight, where the person has succeeded in devising a pathological way of seeing things which allows him to explain his abnormal experiences. The person, when I'm reading this, I think of so many people I know right now that this matches perfectly. The person now sees a deep meaning in his experiences, hence the word insight. The obvious problem is that it's a psychotic insight that will lead him into an even deeper state of a psychotic break with the true reality that the others live in. Now, and I'm seeing this. There's so many friends that I can no longer talk with because some of them don't want to hear it anymore. And the others, I can tell, it just, whew, they're like a deer in the headlights. And no matter what I say, I can come back 2 or 3 weeks later and ask them about it, and they don't even remember the conversation. They're in some kind of a psychotic break with anybody that disagrees with their view of reality. I know it's a little bit scary sometimes, but we all have to keep going, because I think it's all coming down, by the way. Back to the article. This usually only happens to weak and vulnerable individuals. Sorry, friends of mine that might be listening to this that are part of that. This usually only happens to weak and vulnerable individuals when they are bombarded by negative news and emotions and can no longer make sense of what's being programmed into them. In our world, I believe it's by design. To identify the collective psychosis we are experiencing, you need to understand the end goal, which is totalitarianism. Then, and only then, can you understand the journey we are on. All of us are on this journey. Of course, on a deeper level is transhumanism, but that is beyond the scope of and intent of this article. Now, if you want to watch I did an interesting interview with Alana Freeland on her book, Geoengineering and Transhumanism. And you can still find that on YouTube if you go to youtube.com/Lotus Guide and look in my folders and look in the BBS folder that is there. It's hard to find it otherwise. I've put in all the search words right, the meta tags and everything, but it's hard to find. But if you go to youtube.com/Lotus Guide, and I think I may have put it up on the BitChute channel also. But you can also listen to it on bbsradio.com/spiritual activist. Really a great interview. And she talks about transhumanism there. And if you don't think that that's real, think again. The Supreme Court just passed down a law that humans, in quotes, that are transhuman have no constitutional rights. Now, why are they doing that? Because they're getting ready. If your genome, which is patented, by the way, if your genome is altered just a little bit by genetically modified foods, or the air that we breathe, that we're being sprayed constantly for about 15, 20 years now with all kinds of shit in the air. And now with these, they're telling us now it's an RNA upgrade to our DNA, these Moderna shots. They're actually changing our DNA. All they have to do is change it a little bit, and we're transhuman. At that point, we'll find ourselves in court with no constitutional rights because we're no longer a complete, genuine human being. There's a lot going on, people. The things I say I'm very careful. These things are actually real. And it sounds like you're listening to some mad conspiracy theorist, but and that might be true, by the way. I might be a little bit mad at this point, in the true sense of the word, just tired of the bullshit. I'm just tired of it. And I'm ready to put it all on the line, which you'll see at the bottom of this article. Okay, back to the article. Arthur Versluis, not too sure how to pronounce that, wrote in his book, The New Inquisitions, in a totalitarian society, the population is divided into two groups, the rulers and the ruled. And we can see that happening. And both groups undergo a pathological transformation. The rulers are elevated to the almost godlike status, which is diametrically opposed to our nature as imperfect beings who are easily corrupted by power. We all know about absolute power and what it does. The masses, on the other hand, are transformed into the dependent subjects of these pathological rulers and take on a pathologically regressed and childlike status. where we end up looking for a father figure or a mother figure, and that becomes the government. I'm sorry to say this, but I see so many people in my life and in society as a whole who are completely deluded. How else could we let people rise to the highest level of government to control us, who absolutely show signs of dementia? And do I even have to say who I'm talking about? We all know who I'm talking about. That's the crazy thing. We all know that Biden is losing it. Now it's two different of his security people have become whistleblowers and told us he's becoming incontinent on top of everything else, not just his mind, but his body. I mean, this is no longer funny, people. It's actually pretty sad. And I think his wife, Jill, should be brought up on charges for elder abuse. She knew this going into it, that he couldn't handle it. And you watch, Biden is going to get thrown under the bus. They wanted somebody disposable they could throw under the bus, say, yeah, he really fucked up, but, he's demented, and we're going to put him in an assisted living now, or whatever they're going to do with him. General Milley, you watch see what they do to him. Fauci, under the bus. It's coming. Okay, shows signs of dementia. Or General Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who seems to be clueless and is more concerned with political issues like white rage and communicating on back channels to the Chinese Communist Party. Then there's Dr. Fauci, who changes his mind on a daily basis and lies to Congress, giving us health mandates. Remember, these are the very same institutions that told us more doctors recommend cool cigarettes than any other cigarettes. And they also lied to Congress. What they call it, the four men of, I forget now. But they went to Congress and lied that cigarette smoking is not dangerous. It does not cause cancer. And they knew it. Okay. We're talking about the same organizations, the same kinds of people that are passing out vaccinations. And it's coming. It's all coming out. Nurses, doctors, thousands of doctors are waking up to this. And actually, I think they just want to be on the right side of history when this all crumbles, because that day is coming. Don't think for a moment that the United States of America could never become a totalitarian state. The mass psychosis of totalitarianism has happened throughout history on the sleeping masses. Quote, "It is simply a question of reorganizing and manipulating collective feelings in the proper way." It's by a person named Juste Merleau, The Rape of the Mind. This is called menticide, or the killing of the mind. This is a fairly easy process in today's world, where the elites in control can censor any dissenting points of view, no matter how well documented. Look into who owns the corporate media and newspapers like the Washington Post and the New York Times. They all have a vested interest in maintaining the psychosis. And this is crazy what we're going through right now. I was listening to, I think, Glenn Beck. He was talking to Bill O'Reilly. And Bill O'Reilly said several of the fake news channels, they haven't even covered at all the Afghanistan debacle, where people are, right now, they're being held hostage. And I'm just some guy up here in Northern California. I figured this out a long time ago, that the Taliban is going to keep at least a couple hundred Americans and use them for bartering chips. They would be ridiculous for them not to do that, showing their history. And our top military people are saying, well, we're counting on the Taliban to do the right thing. Get off of my Jesus. These people that's running this country right now, they're either evil to the point of not even being able to describe it, or they're morons beyond any kind of ability to even explain it. Because they're not making sense at all unless they truly are evil and they're selling out our country. How would you sell out a country? Well, first thing you'd have to do is grab hold of the elections and rig it to where you're never going to lose again. And they did that in Venezuela and several other countries. And let's see, what voting machine did they use? Oh yeah, Dominion. What voting machine did they use here in the United States? Oh, yeah, it was Dominion. That's the first thing you do. Rig the election so you'll never lose an election again. So you get a totalitarian despot in there that's authoritarian and a complete asshole, it doesn't matter. He's always going to get voted back in. What else would you do? Well, you break down the borders. You make the border so porous that all of your enemies and all of the people that you would normally vet just come rushing across the border. Look at the border. It's a mess, people. It's a mess, but I think it's by design. I have to think that these people can't be that moronic. They would forget to put their pants on of a morning and walk out in the street if they were that stupid. Okay, back to the article. Things are changing quickly right now, and people are waking up. It's only a matter of time when this ends, like most movements like this do end. People who can still think critically and rationally need to keep talking and exposing the madness. Then, one by one, the psychopathic leaders get thrown under the bus because they become a liability. Then, as the ship starts to sink and the rats abandon it, they start talking. That's what's happening now, too, folks. It's time to make sure you are on the right side of what's going on or coming down. Be the hero of your own story, our collective story, because history will show what it has always shown about collective insanity or mass psychosis. It doesn't work. Which means that I guess these people are just crazy and they think finally they're going to figure this out. Maybe they figured out with the technology and the media in control, they could make it work this time. But it's not working. No matter how many statues you tear down, no matter how many books or social media sites you're censoring opposing points of view, it always collapses. An honest look at reality and history proves this out. Otherwise, we'd all be speaking German and there would be no men or women wearing glasses or who could read or write. It doesn't work. Do your own research. Use DuckDuckGo as your search engine and Tor instead of Firefox or Safari. That's what I always have to do because the algorithms will lock you in and filter out so much. I've looked at things on DuckDuckGo and looked at this very same search thing on Google, and I looked at rigged elections on DuckDuckGo, and you get a lot of interesting feedback. Look it up on Google. All I got back was conspiracy ideas, conspiracy theorists, wild people, and they know what they're doing. So you better know what you're doing. Do your own research, like I do. And by remembering the psychological tools that are used against us, they become less effective. Contradictory reports, nonsensical information, and obvious lies, all of which puts us in a state of confusion and less capable of dealing with the crisis of the day. So here's something I want to talk about before I close. And I think it's probably one of the most important things that's going to be happening over the next maybe few days, especially as Arizona comes up with their results of the election. I'm just going to play a little short clip from OAN. OAN is sort of like Newsmax. It's people getting together and trying to get the truth out there. Just take a listen.
The Biden administration also continues to attack those asking questions about the 2020 elections. Here's more with One America's Scott Wheeler.
Joe Biden delivered a jarring speech in Philadelphia Tuesday. It was perhaps one of the most strident speeches delivered by an American president in 80 years, and also one of the most dishonest. For one thing, Biden claimed that the 2020 election was the most scrutinized election in history. Take a look.
With recount after recount after recount, court case after court case, the 2020 election was the most scrutinized election ever in American history. Challenge after challenge brought to local, state, and election officials, state legislatures, state and federal courts.
Of course, the facts are that well over half the ballots cast for Biden were done so through mail, drop boxes, much of which was unsupervised or in some states controlled by Democrat Party operatives without verifying who voted and from where those ballots came. Those facts alone are clear evidence that this was the least scrutinized election in modern times.
I don't know if you caught that or not, but one of the ballots had Albert Einstein on it.
And up until recently, courts ruled that those ballots could not be examined for authenticity. Biden's claims of so-called recounts had nothing to do with validating votes, only recounting the same ballots without ever verifying the origins. Biden also said that merely questioning his election was tantamount to supporting slavery, Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan.
You can imagine the most undemocratic, the most unpatriotic, yet sadly not unprecedented. From denying enslaved people full citizenship until the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments after the Civil War, to denying women the right to vote until the 19th Amendment 100 years ago, to poll taxes and literacy tests, and the Ku Klux Klan campaigns of violence and terror that lasted into the 50s and 60s.
Then, in a strange reference to Supreme Court decisions in 2013 and 2 weeks ago, rulings that Biden does not like, he likens the court decisions and anyone questioning the 2020 election to an insurrection.
To the Supreme Court decision in 2013, and then again just 2 weeks ago, a decision that weakened the landmark Voting Rights Act. To the willful attacks, election attacks in 2020, and then to a whole other level of threat, the violence and the deadly insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th.
I can't even hardly listen to this, but it's important to hear him out. It's oh my God. I at this point I'm not too sure how I'm supposed to relate to people that still support this guy.
So on the one hand, Biden says any courts that refuse to look at evidence of vote fraud in the 2020 election is legitimate. But any court ruling he doesn't like is an insurrection against his authority. This raises serious questions about whether or not Biden has dispensed with our three branches of government and declared himself the supreme leader. Is it possible that this is an attempt to intimidate those who are seeking to audit votes, not only in Pennsylvania, but in Georgia and Arizona too? Is it because those investigations are turning up evidence of potential vote fraud? The entire tone of Biden's remarks were an attack on anyone asking questions about the 2020 election, saying nothing like this has ever happened. Biden critics would point out that throughout the entire Trump presidency, the Democrat Party, including Biden himself, falsely claimed that the 2016 election was hacked and Trump was an illegitimate president, and they had no evidence for those claims. For the past 40 years, Democrats have questioned almost every election of a Republican president. Now, when there's more reason to ask questions and be suspicious, Democrats tell us to shut up or else your questions might be considered an insurrection. For One America News in Washington, I'm Scott Wheeler.
House Democrats launch a bid to derail the Arizona audit of the 2020 election. On Wednesday, Democrats Carolyn Maloney and Jamie Raskin released a statement saying that they are launching a probe into cyber ninjas. The Democrats highlighted mainstream media reports that falsely claim that cyber ninjas don't know how to conduct election audits. This comes just one day after the state senators Wendy Rogers and Karen Pham revealed early audit results do not match the purported election outcomes. Arizona Republicans also say the perpetrators of election fraud are facing criminal penalties. Again, this is a live shot. We're still waiting to hear the latest out of Maricopa County. There will be a hearing today, also involving cyber ninjas. So do stay with us for that, but here's more.
An indictment has been filed by the Attorney General in Arizona against voter fraud in last year's general election. I am glad that we are sending a message that we take voter integrity seriously here in Arizona.
Democrats are also accusing auditors of endangering election integrity, which Arizona senators say is misinformation.
That pretty much says it right there. We need to wake up because everything that's going on is starting to collapse. And as it collapses, it's going to take a lot of us critical thinkers to come together and help the people that's been hypnotized and taken into this delusion that we find ourselves in. This is a global takeover. And I don't know, I'm sure you hear the frustration in my voice. I don't even try to hide it anymore. I am frustrated because some of this is so clear, and it's like I'm walking in a room of hypnotized people that don't even see where they're at, and they're all in their delusions, and their delusions are even different. That's the strange and dangerous part about this. I think we're coming to a point. I was listening to Tim Pool. He moved to West Virginia, which is my home state too, because he said the time to be in the cities isn't right now. When this thing starts happening, look up South Africa, what's going on there. It's a total mess. They're shooting at each other. Just normal, everyday people are getting their guns and going to the streets and trying to hold them back. They've destroyed parts of South Africa. That can happen here. And I think there's powerful globalists that want that to happen here. And at the same time all of this is happening, look at the South Seas and look what the Chinese are doing with their warships. They're cruising around Alaska, they're cruising around the South Seas and Hawaii, and you wait, they're going to be in the Caribbean here pretty soon. Because since Biden has shown that he's feeble-minded, weak, and probably bought off, and they know it because they're the ones that bought him off, probably. That's my opinion. But I think it's based upon everything from Hunter Biden on. There were some things on that laptop. I've seen some of the pictures. Oof. I can't even imagine being that high and taking the pictures and putting them on a laptop and then losing the laptop. He's lost 2 laptops. And some of them are, I don't even want to say on my video channel what some of those things were, but it had to do with beatings and young girls. And this is not good, because if we know this, the Chinese people know this. It happened in China in some of their better hotels that I'm sure they had video cameras in there. And who knows what kind of thing that Biden himself was involved in with this. We really don't know, but one thing for sure, he's compromised. That's been pretty clear since the beginning. Why else would he leave Afghanistan and leave a $1.5 billion base to the Chinese and almost $90 billion worth of equipment? And knowing that the Chinese are going to take control now. Maybe it's the Chinese's turn. I don't know. But thanks for listening, and thanks for your patience with me, because sometimes it's hard to do this. So appreciate you tuning in, and we'll be in touch.